We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, how blockchain is affecting real estate investing.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I have a very special guest on the show this week. Now, before I introduce you to my guest and start talking to her, I do want to talk about one of our two sponsors. I want to talk about Mark Purvis, who's actually the guy who edits the show. So all the great things you hear, if it's bad sound quality, it's probably something I did. If it's good sound quality, I'm sure Mark had something to do with it. But Mark right now is promoting his website, legacyspotlight.com. So it's an easy process where you can work with Mark to record stories, family stories. You know, do you ever wish that you could go back and talk to grandpa? Do you ever wish you could go back and hear stories from grandma about when she was growing up, or mom or dad? If you want to do something like that for yourself, for your family, for your parents, for your children, for your grandparents, contact Mark. He makes the process fun. And he can help get those stories recorded so that you can leave your legacy. And so again, the website is legacyspotlight.com for Mark Purvis. Mark is, again, an Emmy Award-winning videographer with over 23 years experience. So we definitely want you to contact Mark if you want to preserve some of those stories for your family for the future. But I'm excited to get to my guest. And, you know, a lot of times I try to vet my guests. I didn't do as much vetting with this guest for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've had her boss on the show before, so I knew that was a good thing. But number two, we both graduated from the same law school. So she is the very, very first person other than me from my law school, from Cumberland School of Law over at Samford University. Samford, S-A-M-F-O-R-D, not Stanford. Samford University, Cumberland School of Law over in Birmingham, Alabama. So I want to introduce my guest, who is from Birmingham. She attended Auburn and graduated in 3 years with a bachelor's in psychology. While attending Auburn University, she was actively involved in the Auburn Honors College and Omega Phi Alpha sorority. Upon graduating, she got her doctorate from Samford, from Cumberland School of Law, and her master's of public administration from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She obtained her JD and MPA in December 2015, and it was involved in Phi Alpha Delta. I was in Phi Delta Phi. I was in the other one. I was in the other legal fraternity. She was in the Christian Legal Society, the Center for Child Advocacy during her time at Cumberland. She's been a clerk at the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Northern District of Alabama, manager of a closing and title company, currently the owner and principal attorney at Iron City Law, boutique law firm in Birmingham, Alabama. She also works for Scott Royal over at Royal Legal Solutions. And so welcome to my guest and fellow Cumberland alumni, Megan Templeton. Welcome, Megan.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How is Birmingham? It's been a while since I've been there.
Yeah, Birmingham is good. You know, we're making a lot of strides, a lot of changes in Birmingham. We're seeing a big influx of tech startups and just a lot of new folks and vitality come to the city. So, you know, it's a great place to be right now. The weather's nice outside, so I can't complain about that either.
Yeah, I loved my time in Birmingham. You know, like I said pre-interview, I remember my first year of law school, it snowed, and that's when I decided I was coming back to Florida because I didn't want to deal with it. But I loved my time in Birmingham. It was a beautiful city. It's undergone some changes. I was there for my 10-year reunion, which, gosh, was 15 years ago, I think. And it had undergone changes in those 10 years since when I left and when I went back for the reunion. But it was a great place. I really enjoyed my time. I'm a little bit jealous that you're still there in Birmingham, although I love Tampa, Florida. You can take the Florida out of the boy. You can take the boy out of Florida, but you can't take the Florida out of the boy.
There you go. Well, you know, and my husband and I, we love Tampa too. We frequent it a good bit. We've got family down there. But yeah, Birmingham's great. You know, we ended up staying here just because we do have family here as well. But, you know, I think Tampa's a great place to land.
Cool. Well, I do want to talk a little bit. So the title of the episode, How Blockchain is Affecting Real Estate Investing. And I will say that I know a little bit about blockchain, enough to be dangerous. I know that blockchain in being used in the real estate space is coming, although I don't know how widely accepted it is. We can talk about that. I also know that blockchain is more than Bitcoin. So, when we talk about blockchain, and you can either correct me or supplement whatever, but blockchain is the technology upon which cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all those coins and NFTs, and all, that's the technology that it's based on. But blockchain itself is not Bitcoin. It's not Ethereum. It's not NFTs. It's just the technology that allows all that stuff to happen, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you'll hear, I think people get confused about that sometimes, and that's understandable. The whole crypto world can be overwhelming and confusing. But so you're exactly right. Blockchain it's not a cryptocurrency. It's not Bitcoin. It's not Ethereum. It is what I think the easiest way to think about it is either as a database or really the ledger that you hold those NFTs, those items on. And so with blockchain, you're looking at more at how things are being stored, and it's just a much more secure storage method and way to interact with that database and how things change. But it's not actually a currency you're going to be able to use. Right. It's where you put the currency. But
it's decentralized, which is one of the big advantages, meaning on the one hand, there's no entity that governs or oversees everything. It's peer-to-peer. So does that make it more secure or less secure?
I think it makes it more secure because the way it has been done. So one way to think about blockchain is really you're putting these groups of NFTs, these common activities into blocks, and then those are being built into chains. Well, when they're put into blocks and added to this chain, you can't change them. They really are locked down. And so inside of that, there's a lot of security. All of the previous steps. It is something that is going to be infallible for you when you go back to look at it. Now, talking about the decentralized, and so the regulations are really flexing on that right now. The Biden administration's paying a lot of attention to it. States are paying a lot of attention to it. So you're going to see more regulations coming out of it. But right now, it's a little bit of the Wild West with things are at currently. But I don't want to give the false impression that that's going to be a long-standing item.
Well, which is interesting that the whole concept here is the decentralization, but now states and I think even the federal government are getting more involved. I attended a blockchain conference in, I think, like mid-year last year, like around this time, 2021. And the state of Florida Department of Revenue sent representatives to that conference to learn more about Bitcoin and blockchain technology. So I agree with you. Regulations are coming. But the irony to me is this whole thing was, I don't want to say started, but a lot of it arose out of the need or the desire to decentralize, and now we're talking about regulating it.
Right. Well, this has been going on since 2009 when the idea of cryptocurrency really started. And, I think it's had a recent boost in popularity. Folks are really starting to focus on it. And so now you've got the SEC is trying to figure out, where does this fit in? Do we need to have oversight in this? And so you're right. It started out as this thing to be decentralized. And I think the authorities that are at large are looking at it and saying, hey, how do we protect this? How do we protect our citizens? And ultimately the question is going to be, how do they make money off of it? Right. And so you're going to see things comes out of the pipeline. I think that's one of the reasons to get involved now, because it's just a little bit, I think it is more fun now than it might be in the future because there's not quite as much oversight yet.
Okay. So I want to talk about what really intrigued me about the opportunity to talk to you was using the blockchain technology in terms of real estate. And so my first job right out of Cumberland, right out of law school, was at a law firm in Miami that did residential and commercial closings. And so even though I don't do closings anymore, I stopped doing closings about 4 or 5 years ago, but I still do a lot of real estate law. I represent title companies. I do a lot of title-related litigation. But my whole career basically has been in real estate, which some of my Cumberland professors would be shocked to hear that, but most of my career has been in real estate law. How are we starting to incorporate the blockchain technology into real estate transactions?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. So with blockchain, really, I think one of the foundational pieces in relation to real estate is just how secure it is. So when you're dealing with real estate, you're looking at a lot of paper, right? I mean, it is a pen and pencil type of environment. So you've got closing documents, you've got financing documents. Documents are changing hands. Clear to close can be, 30 days plus because of all those parties and changing hands of paper. And so with blockchain, you're creating this ledger where you can look back, easily know what a title looks like. There's not going to be any discrepancies of, what actually happened to this deed. But you're also going to have things come into play like smart contracts, which are really going to speed up the closing process. And it's going to remove a lot of variables. And so one of the questions, that I think comes up for folks a lot is, okay, well, if we start using these smart contracts, we make this more accessible. What happens to the traditional players in the real estate world? So companies like title companies, brokers, attorneys that are dealing with it. And I think our role is going to be minimized, right? Like we're moving to a digital age. And I think blockchain, particularly with smart contracts, exceptionally, and that we're just going to see things move quicker and with less need for people involved. It's going to be a much more end user, seller, buyer type of interaction.
So when you say smart contracts, my understanding of smart contracts is it's more like a system. So if A happens, then this happens. If B happens, then that happens. If C happens, then something else happens. And so am I getting it right? In other words, like you said, the smart contract could cut out a lot of that stuff because it'll say, okay, this happened, that happened, the other thing happened. And so therefore, here's where we are in the process. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it really is this chain reaction of if A, then B or C. A lot of people refer to it as a template as well. It's a very templatized process. But you've got that verified chain with that inside of that where that contract is bulletproof. You don't have concerns about any type of fraud. Touching on that, that's another way it's going to hit real estate. Right now, when you're a real estate attorney, probably one of the most things you're worried about is wire fraud, right? I mean, right. It's rampant. You're going to see that cut out a lot because you're going to have that security of the ledger in place. But yeah, for smart contracts, you're spot on.
Okay. And so the smart contract isn't necessarily the contract that we would think the buyer and seller sign to transfer the property between them. It's something different than that or more than that. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the contract, like the actual sale agreement and purchase document and things like that, I mean, those are examples of it, but it comes down to even like, right now I want to put a property on the market. I'm going to find a realtor. I'm going to sign an agreement with a realtor. I'm then going to they're going to post it. Then I'm going to get a dot loop where I've got to sign it with the potential purchaser. I've got loan documents. All of those things are going to be able to put into smart contract forms in one way or the other, I think. And they're going to have those pings, like you said, where it's A, then B, then C, and it's going to account for those scenarios. So I think, ultimately, and hold this loosely because it's my projections, but right now most clear to close is 30 days. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up getting down to below 2 to 3 days. Wow. Just because of how fast things can move.
Wow. Well, I mean, I'd give your opinion a lot of weight because you graduated from Cumberland.
I mean, well, there you go. Got to give props to Cumberland on that one.
There you go. So does this mean title companies and closing attorneys and possibly even realtors and brokers, does this mean that they're going away?
I don't think so. I've heard that said about attorneys for years, right? They're always trying to get rid of us.
There you go.
But I don't think it is going away as much as it'll just be changing in involvement, right? I think you'll see third parties moving to more of a strategic type of relationship with clients where it is advising on here's some areas to look into investing. Here are deals that are good for you. Here are the ramifications around that. Really more of a mind meld with your client where you are actually just helping them establish what their game plan is and taking out some of the admin work, because that's the kind of things that this technology is going to be able to take and run with.
Okay. We're talking about both residential and commercial real estate transactions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Although this could also be applied pretty much to any transaction, but we're talking about real estate for purposes of today's show. You mentioned wire fraud and the reduction of wire fraud by using the blockchain technology. And I'm sure we could swap stories all day on wire fraud. I've got a title company client that was taken for in excess of 6 figures because of some wire fraud that happened. What are some of the other benefits of blockchain technology?
You're going to have things that, foundationally things are just going to get more secure, but then you're also going to see them get a lot easier, more accessible for people and just streamlined. And so, one of the big assets I think that sometimes people don't think off right the bat is if you can tokenize real estate assets, which is what you're going to be able to do by using blockchain, you're going to make the barrier to entry for investors a lot lower because now they're able to invest for a fraction of the price. They're able to invest quickly without having to go through a broker. I mean, there's companies now like Lofty AI and a couple of others that make it so easy to get some type of involvement in the real estate investing world. And that's possible because of being able to take these real estate assets, really make them much more of a liquid type asset by tokenizing them and then having that fractional ownership. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest components you're going to see come out of this is now people can get into real estate for $50, right? And they may not have a large ownership, but that'll grow over time.
Yeah. And so tokenization, the way that I understood it was you're digitizing the asset itself. So are we talking about taking real estate and turning it into something other than real property, or what do you mean by tokenization?
Yeah, so it's really talking about this idea of taking that ownership process. So right now, if I want to purchase property in real estate, I've got to be on the deed in some form or inside the LLC that's on the deed, something like that. Now you're going to see where these platforms are making real estate where really you can purchase just a portion of that property, really almost like akin to a token side of it for a fraction of the price. So it makes it a lot easier to get into it. It's the due diligence period is knocked down. The investment capital is knocked down. So it's just a lot quicker and easier to do.
So it's more of an investment thing than I want to buy this house. We're not talking about buying the homestead property where you're living. This is, I want to invest in a commercial building and get a piece of that deal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And on the flip side of the buying, when you go to sell it, there's a lot, I think selling can be an overwhelming activity, whether it is your personal home or it is an investment property for you. There's a lot that goes into it with a lot of these platforms. Now, if you decide you want to sell, you can put it on a platform quickly. You don't necessarily have to deal with a realtor. You've got the options of getting paid in crypto in some scenarios. So it just opens up a lot of new opportunities.
Sounds like it would reduce a lot of the costs as well.
It's going to reduce a ton of the costs. You reduce the parties involved, kind of like what we're talking about. You're automatically going to cut out costs. But then you also have got a lot of these traditional, like if you do a title search, that's going to be incredibly expensive. Well, title searches are going to be easier now because you've got blockchain. And then if you've got things like closing documents, you've got attorney's fees associated with that. Well, those are going to go away because a lot of it's going to be smart contracts. So you're right. The fees are going to go down dramatically. So I think real estate is just going to be a cheaper field to be involved in.
Wow. I wonder how the title insurance companies and the title insurance underwriters and the title insurance lobbies are going to respond to all of this, because theoretically you wouldn't need title insurance if your title to your portion of the property is on the blockchain. It would be verified all the way up and down the blockchain. Would you even need title insurance at that point?
Yeah, it's, that's a really interesting you brought that up, because I actually was involved in a webinar a couple of weeks ago where that was a discussion. It was a title insurance company talking about how do they stay active in this changing field of real estate where the due diligence and security is more built in than it is now. So yeah, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think it's going to be a pivot for that industry for sure.
Wow. It's really interesting, some of the uses and some of the concepts that we're talking about using the blockchain technology in real estate space. I want to give your contact information really quick. So it's Megan, Megan, at royallegalsolutions.com. You can also find on LinkedIn under Scott Royal Smith or Royal Legal Solutions. Twitter is Royal Legal Law. Facebook is Royal Legal Solutions. How's Scott doing?
Scott's good. He's staying busy. It's got a lot of fun things going on at Royal Legal. We are dipping our toe into some new types of investment opportunities for our clients, some involving crypto, some involving funds. And so he's staying busy with that, but he's also in Utah. So he's doing his outdoorsy thing where he's climbing all the time.
Wow. Yeah. And he's out in Utah. You're out in Birmingham. So you're working remotely with him.
I am. Yeah. So the Royal Legal team, I'm a consulting attorney with them, but we've got team members all over the U.S. We serve all 50 states. So, I think it's one of those companies that's fun to work with because you get to interact with folks all over.
Yeah. But we don't want to talk about Scott so much. We want to talk about you. So anything else that I might be missing? Anything else that you wanted to talk about within this space of blockchain and real estate?
I think we've covered a lot of the foundational pieces. I would say that one of the things I tell most folks is that when you're talking about the idea of blockchain in regards to real estate, sometimes that people can get in their mind that it only involves the parties when you're purchasing, selling, that closed period. But really, it's going to be a lot more scalable than that. Property developers, property owners, investors, tenants, property managers. The people who are going to be able to access this and use it, the reach is going to be really wide. I've got some involvement inside of the real estate field utilizing blockchain and crypto, using crypto. And so inside of that, I've started collecting some of my rents in crypto, and that's been a really interesting area for me. I've also got some property management function that are on platforms that use blockchain, and that's made it a lot easier to get, maintenance requests and things like that handled. So just something to keep in mind if you are not specifically a real estate investor, but if you're on the fringes of it, it's probably going to impact you. So it's something blockchain and crypto are worth learning about because I think it's just going to become more prevalent. So
you've got tenants that are paying you in crypto?
I do. Yeah. So there's an intermediary, there's a platform it's going through, but it's been interesting. I've enjoyed it. So
that's really interesting. We probably should take some time and talk about that a little bit more. But I think for now, I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate you talking to us about blockchain and real estate investing. And like I said, other than me, the first Cumberland alumni to be on the show. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So before I let you go, I do want to talk about our second sponsor, who actually was our first sponsor, and that's Sam Cohen. Sam owns a company called Attorneys First Insurance. Those of you that are longtime listeners know Sam and know his company, but Attorneys First provides errors and omissions insurance or malpractice insurance for attorneys and title companies all over the country. He's located here in Florida. I know he's got a lot of clients in Florida. I know he's also focusing on attorneys and title companies in Texas. And I'm sure he would love to talk to some Birmingham attorneys as well there, Megan. Sam can do an apples to apples comparison, talk about what you've got, how that compares to what you might want to get when you renew your malpractice insurance. And so great way to support the show would be to support Sam. A great way to support Sam would be to introduce him to an attorney or title company that you know that needs to buy or renew their E&O policy, their professional malpractice policy. And you can contact him at sam@attorneysfirst.com or www.attorneysfirst.com. So I think that'll get us to the end of this episode. Again, Megan Templeton, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Congratulations on being the first Cumberland alumni to be interviewed. I think some of the professors I had may still even be there, although I'm sure there's been a little bit of turnover there. Is Strickland still the dean?
Strickland's the dean, yeah, or at least to my knowledge. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to show my card and say I haven't kept up with it in the past couple of years, but to my understanding, yes.
Okay, so Strickland was there when I was there.
Okay.
And there were a handful of other professors that I see that are still there, but I'm sure there's been a lot of turnover. But anyway, Megan Templeton out in Birmingham, Alabama, Cumberland School of Law. You can sometimes tell my southern accent comes back a little bit after spending 3 years in Birmingham, Alabama. But I think that'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the month you have more money rather than at the end of the money you have more month. Thanks again, Megan. I'll put her contact information again in the notes. And if you have any questions about blockchain and real estate investing, definitely reach out to Megan. I'm sure she can help you. But that'll do it for this week's episode, and we look forward to talking to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.